Well, I tell you what, in Minnesota, I think a state holiday would have to be the walleye opener. We're back up on Leech Lake, which, goodness, it's a it's a pretty good sized body of water, but just a tremendous walleye fishery in Minnesota. We're with Dusty Minke again, and it's basically opening week. I mean, we're what, 3-4 days after the season, and so everything's kind of fresh, everything's kind of new, and we could really use a little bit of wind out here today. But I tell you what, this time of year, this is a fun body of water to fish.
We are a few days after the Minnesota walleye opener here on Leech Lake, and last weekend it was okay. It was typical Leech Lake. We needed more wind like we do today, but we caught a few with jig and shiners and a few on slip bobbers. That's the thing, we're just moving around trying to find active pods of fish. It seems like you've got to go through a lot of different fish, especially when there's no wind. So that's just what we're doing. We're hunting them down and using the Lowrance Active Target and casting at as many fish as we can.
Got him.
Better one?
Love watching that. Yeah, it might be.
Oh yeah, that's a Leech Lake walleye, huh?
You look at Leech Lake, especially breaking down the general patterns early in the year, there's a lot of wind-blown patterns where you're dealing with shallow sand, maybe some tufts of chara and weeds coming up on that sand, and it's really gradual structure. And these fish move around in that structure, and so you got to move around a lot and find these fish, either drifting or casting. You're going to find areas where there's walleyes anywhere from, say, maybe 6 feet all the way out to 14, 15 feet. Then you've got some weed line patterns where if you can find good stands of cabbage in particular, you're going to find walleyes relating to that cabbage. And those fish are going to be more confined, where they're going to be in specific zones or spots, maybe some edges of the cabbage, maybe some open lanes, maybe it's the outside edge, maybe it's an open pocket. But that's a lot more surgical style fishing. Then you've got some rock structure, some of it's offshore. Some of it might be just a rock bar that comes off the shoreline where the wind's blowing in. And so rock humps, rock saddles that are, a lot of times less than 12 feet of water. You've got your sand flats that are getting hit by the wind. Then you've got your cabbage beds. But those three general locations account for a lot of fish on Leech Lake. Got one on you?
Oh, it's active. These fish are a little more active over here.
And so this is just kind of an aggressive way to attack this, in the sense that we're just scooting around with the trolling motor, using forward-facing sonar, using the active target to look for fish. We see a pot of fish, we're just casting either a jig or a slip bobber at these fish. And you know what? They don't want to bite, and we just move on to the next pack. And tell you what, sometimes you go along and catch a few, sometimes you find a group of fish, they don't want nothing to do with you, but there we go, right there. That bobber just dunked.
That looks like a better one too.
Yeah. It's nice when they bite on cue.
Yeah, that's a nicer one, Jace.
And usually they, if they're gonna hit right away, it seems like. Oh yeah, there's a really nice fish. Oh wow, look at there. Hey, look at that.
There you go. That's a nice one.
That's a fist bump there.
Yeah,
huh?
that's a good one.
All right.
Nice work. Here you go.
Yeah. Show her off, huh? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That is a nice walleye right there. Yeah, we'll get this little jig out of the net here. We'll kind of go over some presentations that are just classic on Leech Lake. And I tell you what, 1/8 ounce, 1/4 ounce jig and a shiner is one of the old time classics, especially for this time of year. And the other thing that's really gaining steam is just slip bobber and a leech in conjunction with forward-facing sonar, where you're looking for fish, you're casting at a fish, and I tell you what, it's a It's a pretty high batting average. I mean, when you're, you know, just eliminating the dead time, eliminating the dead space, every time that bobber hits the water, every time that jig drops down, you know, you're landing in front of a fish. Some of them aren't going to bite, but I tell you what, it's a way to up the odds dramatically if you're fishing a lot of these lakes here in northern Minnesota.
So this is my bobber setup. I have 8 to 10 pound mono, you know, just a basic, you know, bobber stop there. And then when it comes to the other end here, down to a weighted Northland balsa bobber. And then we've got, you know, a slidable tungsten weight, bead to protect the knot, swivel. And then about a 2 to 3 foot 6 or 8 pound fluorocarbon leader, and then I've got a short shank Northland tungsten jig on the business end, and we'll probably tip this with a leech. So with tungsten, it's a denser metal and it gets us down quicker, but it also, you know, kind of hides. It's a smaller profile, so the nice thing is that how quick that bait gets down. When you're sharp shooting them, you know, with the forward facing sonar, you want everything to be kind of quick. You know, before we used to throw an anchor out and pitch bobbers towards a rock pile. Now you're trying to get on those fish, get down to them fast, and with a nice tungsten jig, you know, that gives you that small profile and it gets down to those fish faster.
We got him.
Nice. Need the net?
I think so. Oh yeah, nice walleye, Dusty.
Sweet.
Look at that. Isn't that a beautiful sight in that clear water?
Yes.
I'm gonna hit spot lock here too real quick, just so we don't drift off. Oh yeah. That is a gorgeous fish. Oh,
There you go. Nice work.
you gotta love
awesome.
Leech Lake, huh?
Oh yeah. And that bobber going down?
That is cool, and that's something too. You know, I don't care how old you get. When we were kids riding our bikes down to the river, you know, it was all watching a bobber. I still love watching a bobber. Great stuff. This is a beautiful fish. Here, we'll pull her out. Show her off. There we go. There. Nothing wrong with that, huh?
There's a lot of those in here.
Yeah, that's just it. It's just healthy fishery. I mean, just numbers of fish. I love coming out here. You got him?
Yeah, I got him.
All right.
Drag's a little loose. There we go. Boy, there's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah. Good stuff here. I'll come with the net here.
Perfect eater.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that would be a great eater.
I was like, man, my bobber's got to go down soon. There's a lot of them under it.
Oh yeah, look at them all out there.
Yeah, right in the snout.
Yeah.
That tungsten jig's got a perfect gap on it.
I know, I really like the hook on those jigs. You know, one of the things I really appreciate about Leech Lake is just, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of locations that you can fish. I mean, you look at Walker Bay, Agency Bay, you look at the main lake, you know, the offshore rock structure out of the main lake. Then you look up in Sucker Bay and all the weed lines and the weed beds. Then you've got Steamboat Bay. I mean, there's just a lot of different water on Leech Lake. And in every area, every zone of Leech Lake, it's almost like it has its own personality. And there's great fishing throughout the lake, you know, but we've been coming up here for years. And, you know, it seems like one thing that's consistent is obviously wind is a big factor. You always want to fish the wind, fish locations where the wind's blowing in. And the other thing to remember is that on Leech Lake, a lot of times you have a hard time catching fish right below the boat unless it's deep water and really windy conditions. And what we're seeing on forward-facing sonars, if you don't have a lot of wind especially, you know, you might only get within, say, 30 feet of fish and they start to push away. And so just factor that in when you're fishing Leech Lakes. You don't have that heavy wind, get away from the boat. Long line behind the boat or cast, and you're going to catch way more fish, way more walleyes on Leech Lake.
See, they're about 40, 50 feet out there.
Yeah.
If you can keep a little bit of distance, you know, when you're fishing them on the clear, open water like this, just a little bit of distance between
That's the
you
thing
and
is
them.
these lakes are changing so much. You know, we were just talking the other day. I mean, there's a lot of renowned walleye fisheries in Minnesota where if you were to come out here 30 years ago, it was all back trolling, Lindy rig below the boat, bail open, put a little bit of air in a night crawler, and there's all fishing below or behind the boat. It's to the point now where on a lot of these lakes, it's really hard to catch fish below the boat. I mean, they're definitely spooking from the boat. This water's cleared up, zebra mussels, whatever reason, there's a lot more casting. You gotta reach the fish with a cast.
Yep.
Boy, there's a bunch of them up there.
See that? Yeah, I'm right on them. I'd cast right by me.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the lefty here. You should be right in them right there.
I gotta be.
Oh, here we go, here we go.
There we go. Oh,
Got 'em.
nice. Cool.
That one smacked it. Maybe just a great eater. You know, when you look at that first month after the opener, you know, on Leech Lake specifically, you know, I would guess that maybe 90% of the fish are caught on a jig and a minnow. And a lot of times a jig and a shiner, although you don't always have to use shiners. You know, sometimes a big fathead or a rainbow can be more durable, especially when you're casting. But a jig and a minnow is usually the program. And you know, you look at 1/8 ounce jig, 1/4 ounce jig, 16th ounce jigs. I mean, those are things you're going to have when you fish Leech Lake. And so a lot of times, you know, we're combining the jig and minnow setup with a slip bobber and a leech. You know, that's kind of the 1-2 punch in the sense that, you know, you might have windows where the fish are chasing a jig and, you know, maybe some wind where the fish are fired up a little bit. We're covering a little bit of water, pulling that jig away from the fish, you know, that'll trigger strikes. But when things get tough and that wind lays down especially, you know, it's tough to beat just a plain hook or a small jig and a leech below a slip bobber. So those are the two presentations that really seem to account for a big percentage of the fish caught on Leech Lake, especially early in the year. All right, got him.
There we got him, yep.
All right.
You just caught one, got one.
Fun stuff. That one a little bit, oh yeah, that's a nice one there, Dusty.
Yeah.
I will get the net here for you, sir. Oh yeah. Oh.
Nice, thank you.
All right.
Nice 18-inch size.
Yeah.
That thing had it down far.
Fish didn't like you.
That guy was lucky we had a big fish fry last weekend.
Oh yeah, some of these would be just perfect for that.
Yeah.
You know, using forward-facing sonar, there's a couple different things you can do. You know, you can mount your transducer on a pole system where you can spot lock, and then you can have it on an independent pole where you can pan independently from the trolling motor. Because obviously whenever you spot lock, you know, the forward-facing sonar is either facing upwind or up current or upstream. But at the same time, when it comes time to, you know, really hunt for fish and be aggressive, you know, I like to have it on the trolling motor shaft itself. And the biggest thing is, you know, your foot pedal is so fast. You can pan around, you can look, but then both of your hands are free to cast. And so biggest things with your setting, you know, we've got it in forward mode right now. We've got it on a range of 70 feet. And the other thing too is a lot of times I have the noise rejection off. And the biggest thing is a lot of times I like to use a stable view, especially if it's on the trolling motor. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes you'll see fish without the stable view if you have it at an angle. But what I find is by just leveling that bottom out, it's just a lot easier to read when it's on your trolling motor, because every time you adjust the angle of the transducer, you know, you got to take the trolling motor out of the water. And so use a stable view. I'm using pallet number 3, but that's personal choice. And biggest thing is, you know, understand that, you know, the forward-facing sonar doesn't just make the fish jump in the boat. And probably the biggest thing that Dusty and I have talked about throughout the day is that you have to learn to leave fish at times, in the sense you're going to find fish, you're going to see fish. If they don't bite, if you wear out your welcome, it's funny, you catch a couple fish out of a school, the rest of the school wants nothing to do with anything. Leave fish to find new fish with forward-facing sonar. That's probably the hardest lesson we've all had to learn when it comes time to learning how to use it. There's a bunch of fish right there. We're kind of mixing it up here. You know, we're getting a little bit of wind, which we were hoping for, we were praying for. Wind is always your friend on Leech Lake and a lot of these northern Minnesota lakes, but kind of mixing it up, kind of a 1-2 punch. We're throwing slip bobber, especially if it's flat, we don't have wind. And then we're mixing up pitching jigs. And you know, and the reality is that, you know, pitching a jig and a shiner, jig and a minnow, I mean, that's the classic presentation that catches so many fish on Leech Lake. And in the last couple of years, you know, the slip bobber thing has really taken off just in conjunction with forward-facing sonar. Where you're just, you know, you're looking for fish using side imaging. And then you get lined up on them with forward-facing sonar and you're casting right at fish or right at schools of fish. Here we go. Got one going here. Oh yeah. That is fun. Look at that. Fish is just digging. That's a good fish there. Whoa, come here. Stretching out that line. Nice walleye. Nice walleye.
Yeah, that's a nicer one, Jace. There you go. That's a nice one.
That is a stud of a walleye. Oh my. Oh, look at that. That tungsten jig right in the corner of her mouth. Get her unhooked here. Oh, that's a nice fish. That is a beauty. Long and strong. That makes a person's day, you know what? You come out here, tangling a few of those. That is good way to spend the day. All right, we'll go get her in the water. Yeah, that's a nice fish. And there she goes. Boy, they shoot straight down when they take off. You know, as far as throwing jigs, I tell you what, I don't know if anything has caught more fish in this part of the world than just a classic Northland stand-up fireball jig, specifically in the parrot color. I mean, that's just a jig that's caught a lot of fish in this part of the world, you know, tipped with a shiner. And, you know, last few years, really fallen in love with these Northland tungsten jigs, which you can see there. The biggest thing with tungsten is it's denser. And so, you know, some people say, oh, it's heavier than lead. Well, if you compare same mass, yes, tungsten would be heavier than lead because it's denser. But the reality is that an 1/8 ounce, 1/4 ounce jig that's lead is the same as a 1/4 ounce jig that's tungsten. It's the same weight. But what you'll see is that when you start getting, especially like an 1/8 ounce, 1/4 ounce, the size is a lot smaller. And that's what I like about tungsten, is that you're fishing with a smaller size jig that gets the job done. And I think the reason that can be an advantage is that when these fish move their gills to pull water in to take that bait, especially in cold water, it's just easier for them to flare their gills and to suck that jig and minnow in. And the other thing is that, you know, tungsten's a harder metal, so it does feel more sensitive. So you can make bottom contact and then feel the bottom much better. And so, especially if you're fishing transitions, trying to learn a spot, gravel, rock, sand, you can feel all that. And I feel like it's easier to distinguish a pickup or a bite when you're making that bottom contact. And so, once you use tungsten, you know, unless you're dealing with a lot of snags or you're retying all the time, You know, most people just fall in love with it. It's a deal out here where you might lose a jig or two a day, maybe to pike, you know, and you're not going through a lot of tackle. The performance of tungsten is hard to beat. You know, Leech Lake is a pretty good sized body of water, but it's also broken up into several bays. There's boat ramps around the lake. There's still a lot of resorts on the lake, and so it's really a favorite destination for a lot of walleye anglers. You look at the community of Walker, I mean, there's great restaurants, there's all kinds of shops. In the summertime, downtown Walker is just busy, you know. But the fishing, you know, that's kind of the backbone of this entire community, and Leech Lake is a renowned walleye fishery. Obviously, you've got big muskies in Leech Lake. You've got great panfish. There's some phenomenal largemouth bass in Leech Lake. The smallmouths are starting to come on. Plus, you've got all kinds of small lakes surrounding Leech Lake where you can, you know, add even more variety, you know, and so it really is a mecca, you know, if you love to fish.